Hello everybody, my name is Ismail Jumambogo from Education. I will be with you in Physics Form 3. Topic is concerning about the frictions. Today we are going to discussing about the frictions. On the frictions we are going to looking about the types of frictions. In frictions there are many types of frictions, includes the static friction force and dynamic friction force. Static friction force, by the way, static friction force is the frictional force at the rest. When a body is at the rest, we say that the body undergoes static friction force. So static friction force is the friction at the rest, kwamba kitu kikiwa kimekaa au mtu akiwa amekaa ametulia pale ana undergo aina ya friction ambayo tunaita ni static friction. This force causes the material to be stationary. So static friction ni force ambayo inafanya kitu kiweze kuwa katika stationary position. Example, book can keep in top of the desk without it drop down. So unapochukua kitabu ukakiweka juu ya meza bila kile kitabu kuweza kudondoka, tunasema kwamba hicho kitabu kina undergo a static friction. From the concept of frictional force is equal to coefficients of static frictions over normal reactions, whereby the Fr is stand for static frictional force and R is stand for normal reactions, and the mu is stand for coefficient of static force. So the frictional force is equal to coefficient of static frictional force times normal reaction. So the definitions of coefficient of static friction is the ratio of limiting frictional force to the normal reaction. So the ratio ambayo utakayoipata kati ya limiting frictional force pamoja na normal reaction, hicho kitu tunakiita ni coefficient of static friction. Kwamba tukiwa tunatafuta coefficient of static friction ni sawasawa na mtu achukue limiting frictional force agawie kwa normal reaction. So by the way, once we need to find the coefficient of static frictions, we divide normal reaction both sides. Divide by R, divide by R. So the mu, that is the static coefficient of frictional force, is equal to frictional force over normal reactions. Another types of frictional force is dynamic frictional force. By the way, what is dynamic frictional force? So dynamic frictional force we can define is the frictions occurs when object moving relative to each other. When the object is just moving relatively to each other, we say that body is undergoing frictional force. Kwa vitu vikiwa vina move kwa pamoja, either kama ni magari mawili yana move au mipira ina move, tunasema kwamba hivyo vitu vina undergo something what we call dynamic frictional force. So the dynamic frictional force is the frictions which occurs when object moving relative to each other. Dynamic frictional force also called the kinetic frictional force. Sometimes we can say the dynamic frictional force is also known as kinetic frictional force. So from the formula, which you state that the frictional force is equal to static coefficient of kinetic frictional force times R. This is a formula that get us to find the coefficients of kinetic frictional force. So the friction of Fr is the stand for kinetic frictional force. R is the stand for normal reactions, and the mu is the stand for coefficient of static frictional force. So tukiwa tunaamua kutafuta coefficient of kinetic frictional force, maana yake ni sawasawa na mtu achukue the frictional force agawie kwa normal reaction. So tukiwa tutake kupata frictional force, ni sawasawa na mtu achukue coefficient of kinetic frictional force times normal reactions. Therefore, by definitions, coefficients of kinetic friction is the ratio of kinetic frictional force to the normal reaction. So coefficients of kinetic friction, ili tuweze tukupata kwamba coefficients of kinetic friction tunasema is the ratio, ni ule mgawanyo wa kinetic frictional force, ile frictional force due to the motion or frictional force due to kinetics to the normal reactions. So here we are looking about the frictional force at the inclined plane. So the frictional force at the inclined plane, we consider the diagram below. A mass of a body sliding down the inclined plane. Once we have a mass of a body, and this mass of the body is moving along downward the inclined plane, it undergoes some of formulas which we derive from here. So wakati hichi kitu kina move kwa along the inclined plane kushuka chini, tunapata baadhi ya formula hapa, ambapo tunasema tukipiga hapa katikati weight ya hichi kitu, tunasema weight ya hichi kitu ni mg cos theta, lakini hapa juu inakuwa ni resolution ya normal reactions, lakini hii frictional force inakuwa ni sawasawa na mg sin theta. This is happen due to the angle formed due to the angle formed of the inclined plane. Ikiwa hii inclined plane imetengenezeka katika angle fulani, ule mzigo wa kitu au mzigo au body fulani tukawa tumeiweka pale kwenye inclined plane yetu, tukianza kuresolve tutasema kwamba hii normal reaction is equal to mg cos theta. Why mg cos theta? Ni kwa sababu iko katika angle fulani. Wakati hii angle ingekuwa ni 90 degrees au wakati hapa angle ingekuwa ni sifuri, maana yake mg cos sifuri, value ya hii cos sifuri ni moja. Kwa maana hiyo tungesema normal reaction ni sawasawa na mg, lakini kwa sababu hii kitu ina float the inclined plane lakini imetengenezewa at angle fulani, kwa maana hiyo sasa normal reaction ni sawasawa na mg cos theta. Lakini pia this frictional force, wakati tunazungumzia kuhusiana na frictional force, ikiwa inaenda huku, maana yake frictional force ina balance na force ambayo hii force ni mg sin theta. Why? This is happen due to the concept of every reaction that is equal to the opposite reaction. This was the third Newton's law of motion. So this body is moving, it undergoes the third Newton's law of motions, whereby the normal reaction is equal to the opposite reaction, which is mg cos theta, and this frictional force is equal to opposite reaction, which is mg sin theta. This angle is obtained due to this angle from the inclined plane. When the body is at constant speed, when the body is undergo constant speed, acceleration of that body is equal to 0. At constant speed, we assume that acceleration is equal to 0 meter per second square. The frictional force of kinetic energy or force of kinetic energy is equal to mg sin theta. This Fk is similar to Fr. This Fk is similar to Fr, which is kinetic frictional force. So Fk, which is frictional kinetic force, is equal to mg sin theta. As we see here on this diagram, we say that Fr